The Varian councils sat in their crystal chamber, watching their worlds die one by one. For 300 years, they had built a peaceful society across 12 beautiful planets. Their people were farmers, artists, and scientists who had never known real war. They grew food that fed half the galaxy and created art that brought joy to billions of beings across the stars. But now everything was ending. The hive had come from the dark spaces between stars, moving like a plague across the galaxy. These creatures didn't negotiate or trade. They simply consumed everything in their path. When they found a world, they stripped it completely bare. Every tree, every animal, every living thing became food for their endless hunger. The people who lived there were just another resource to be harvested. Council leader Thaler watched the latest reports with growing horror. Planet Varia Prime had fallen yesterday. The beautiful floating cities where his own children had played were now empty shells. The hive ships looked like massive metal insects, each one the size of a small moon. They would land on a world and begin the harvest. Within days, a planet that had taken millions of years to develop life would become a lifeless rock. The Varian military had tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for defense against pirates and small conflicts. Their ships were built for exploration and trade, not war. When they faced the hive fleets, it was like children throwing stones at a hurricane. Other galactic powers had promised help, but those promises proved empty. The Cathari Empire was too far away, and said they couldn't spare ships. The Trade Federation offered to sell weapons, but wanted payment the Varians could no longer afford. The Silver Alliance sent thoughts and prayers, but no actual assistance. One by one, their allies found excuses to stay away from the growing threat. Thaler knew they were alone. In desperation, the Council had reached out to every species they could contact. They sent messages to civilizations they had never spoken with before. They even tried contacting the mysterious races from the far edges of known space. Most messages went unanswered. The few responses they received were polite, but firm refusals. Then, someone mentioned humans. The information about this species was strange and contradictory. Some said they came from a world so dangerous that visiting it was considered a death sentence. Others claimed they were warriors who had spent thousands of years fighting each other for practice. The rumors said their planet had weather that could kill animals that hunted for sport, and gravity so strong it would crush most aliens. Most species in the galaxy considered humans to be monsters. They were called Deathworlders, a term used for creatures so adapted to violence that they made other beings uncomfortable. The few traders who had met humans described them as polite, but unsettling. They moved wrong, thought wrong, and seemed to find danger exciting rather than terrifying. But the rumors also said humans had never lost a war. They actually cared about winning. Thaler decided to send the message anyway. What did they have to lose? The transmission went out across space, broadcasting on every frequency the Varians knew. It was a simple plea for help, offering everything they had left in exchange for salvation. They mentioned the whispered stories about humans, hoping against hope that somewhere in the dark, someone was listening who might actually be able to help. On Earth, deep inside a military facility built into a mountain, alarms began to sound. The message had been received. General Mike Thompson was reviewing casualty reports from a training accident when his aide rushed into the room. Colonel Lisa Davis looked excited and worried at the same time. She activated the holographic display, and suddenly the office was filled with images of burning worlds and fleeing ships. Thompson listened to the alien message 3 times before speaking. The desperation in that voice was something he recognized. He had heard it before, in human voices. During the worst moments of their own history, Davis pulled up tactical information about the hive threat. The data was incomplete, but what they could see was terrifying even by human standards. These creatures were not just conquering worlds, they were sterilizing them completely. Thompson made his decision quickly. Lisa, get me Admiral Carter. Tell him to prep the 7th Fleet for immediate deployment. He paused, looking at the images of refugee ships fleeing their dying worlds. And Lisa, tell him we're not going there to negotiate. Admiral Jack Carter stood on the bridge of the UTS Retribution, looking out at the stars through the massive viewing window. The ship was enormous, stretching nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was dark gray, covered in armor plating that could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. This wasn't a ship built for exploration or trade. This was a warship, pure and simple. The bridge around him buzzed with controlled chaos. Officers moved between stations, checking systems and preparing for what might be the longest journey the 7th Fleet had ever undertaken. Carter had served in the human Navy for 30 years, and he had never seen his crew work with such focused intensity. Lieutenant Tom Wilson bent over his navigation console, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. The young officer had graduated top of his class from the Naval Academy, and Carter trusted him to plot courses through the most dangerous regions of space. Wilson's job was made harder by the fact that they were heading into territory no human had ever visited before. Admiral, the calculations are complex, Wilson reported, sweat beading on his forehead. We'll need to make multiple jumps through hyperspace. Some of these routes haven't been mapped by human ships before. We're relying on alien star charts that might not be accurate. Carter nodded. Human ships use different hyperspace technology than most alien races, where other species made gentle, curved paths through space. Human ships punched straight through dimensions, like bullets through paper. It was faster, but more dangerous, and it required precise calculations to avoid ending up inside a star or a black hole. At the communications station, Lieutenant Amy Roberts was monitoring channels across known space. Her equipment could pick up radio signals, quantum transmissions, and even psychic communications from telepathic species. What she was hearing made her increasingly worried. "Sir, you need to hear this," she said, activating the speakers. The bridge filled with alien voices speaking in dozens of different languages. The ship's computer translated them in real time. "The humans are mobilizing their war fleet," came one transmission from the Cathari Empire. "This could destabilize the entire sector." Another voice, this one from a trading post near Variant Space, sounded panicked. "Human warships have been detected. All civilian vessels are advised to evacuate immediately. Repeat, human military forces are approaching." Roberts looked up at Carter with concern. "Admiral, they're calling us Deathworlders. Some of these species are more afraid of us than they are of the hive." Carter wasn't surprised. Humans had been isolated from most galactic civilization for good reason. When first contact had been made 50 years ago, the results had been awkward at best. Human diplomats had tried to be friendly, but their very presence made most aliens nervous. Humans were too strong, too fast, too aggressive. They came from a world where everything was trying to kill them, and it showed. Earth was considered a death world by galactic standards. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent and unpredictable. The animals were predators that hunted for sport. Even the plants could be deadly. Most alien species needed environmental suits just to survive on the surface for a few hours. But that harsh world had created something unique. Humans were natural warriors who had spent thousands of years fighting each other, learning lessons about warfare that other species had never needed to know. When humans finally reached the stars, they brought that knowledge with them. The 7th Fleet reflected this reality. Each ship was built for one purpose: winning wars completely and decisively. The battleships carried enough firepower to level continents. The destroyers were fast and deadly, designed to hunt down fleeing enemies. The carriers launched fighter craft that moved at speeds that would kill most alien pilots through acceleration alone. Carter walked to the tactical display, where the fleet's positions were shown as glowing dots. 47 ships in total, each one crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. These weren't soldiers who hoped to avoid combat. These were warriors who understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. Communications, open a channel to all ship commanders, Carter ordered. The faces of his captains appeared on screens around the bridge. Men and women who had served with Carter through smaller conflicts, training exercises, and peacekeeping missions. They looked ready for what was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter began, "we're heading into unknown territory to face an enemy that has been terrorizing innocent people for months. The galaxy thinks we're monsters. Maybe they're right. But sometimes monsters are exactly what the situation requires." He paused, looking at each face on the screens. The Hive has been harvesting entire worlds, killing billions of beings who never hurt anyone. They think they're the apex predators of the galaxy. It's time they learned what real predators look like. As the fleet prepared to jump into hyperspace, Carter made his final log entry. The galaxy didn't ask for human intervention, but they're getting it anyway. We're not going to Variant space to negotiate or find a diplomatic solution. We're going there to end the threat permanently. If that makes us the monsters of known space, then so be it. Better to be feared and alive than polite and dead. The rich engines roared to life, and space began to bend around the fleet as they prepared to jump into hyperspace. Space around Varian territory had been quiet for weeks. The few remaining civilian ships floated in the darkness, their crews watching helplessly as the Hive consumed world after world. Then, without warning, reality twisted, and 47 massive shapes materialized out of hyperspace. The human fleet emerged from their jump like sharks, rising from deep water. The ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Where most alien vessels were smooth and elegant, human warships looked brutal and functional. They were covered in armor plating, bristling with weapon systems, and painted in colors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Lieutenant Mark Johnson sat at his sensor station aboard the Retribution, his eyes wide as data flooded his screens. Johnson had been monitoring space traffic for 8 years, but he had never seen readings like these. The Hive presence was massive, spread across multiple star systems like a cancer. "Admiral, this is worse than we thought," Johnson reported, his voice tight with concentration. "I'm reading over 200 Hive vessels. They're not just attacking randomly. This is a coordinated harvest operation." Admiral Carter moved to stand behind Johnson's station, studying the tactical display. The Hive ships appeared as red dots scattered across 3 solar systems. Each dot represented a vessel the size of a city, filled with creatures that existed only to consume and destroy. "How long until they reach the Varian homeworld?" Carter asked. Johnson's fingers danced over his controls, running calculations. "Based on their current movement patterns, maybe 2 days. Sir, there are still 4 billion Varians on that planet. If the Hive reaches them..." Carter didn't need Johnson to finish that sentence. Everyone on the bridge understood what the Hive did to populated worlds. The reports from previous attacks had been too horrific for most species to even discuss. Captain Janet Pierce stepped up to the main tactical display, her expression grim. Pierce had spent 15 years studying alien military technology, and she had never encountered anything quite like the Hive. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. "Admiral, these aren't individual vessels," Pierce explained, highlighting formations on the screen. "The entire fleet operates as one organism. They don't have separate commanders or competing strategies. When they decide to attack something, they commit everything at once." Near the edge of Varian space, refugee ships drifted in loose formations. These were the survivors from worlds the Hive had already consumed, families who had fled with nothing but the clothes on their backs, hoping to find safety somewhere in the galaxy. Carter opened a communication channel to the refugee fleet. Immediately, Panicked voices filled the bridge speakers. "Unknown ships, please identify yourselves." The voice belonged to Council Leader Thaler, speaking from a damaged transport vessel. "Are you here to evacuate survivors? Our worlds are gone. The Hive took everything." Carter's response was broadcast across all frequencies. "This is Admiral Jack Carter of the Terran 7th Fleet. We received your distress call. We're not here to evacuate anyone. We're here to solve your problem." The communication channel went silent for several seconds. Then Thaler's voice returned, filled with confusion and hope. "Terran, you mean ... You're the humans? The ones from the Death World?" "That's right," Carter confirmed. "And we're about to show the Hive why our world has that reputation." Johnson suddenly looked up from his sensors, alarm written across his face. "Admiral, the Hive fleet is responding to our presence. They're changing course. It looks like they're moving to intercept us." Pierce studied the tactical display as the red dots began shifting position. "Sir, they're not retreating. The entire fleet is turning toward us. I think they see us as a threat to eliminate before continuing their harvest." Carter smiled coldly. The Hive had made exactly the mistake he had hoped they would make. Instead of continuing their systematic destruction of Varian worlds, they were concentrating their forces to deal with the human fleet. It was tactically logical, but strategically stupid. "Open a channel to the Hive fleet," Carter ordered. The communication array struggled to establish contact with the alien vessels. The Hive didn't use normal radio transmissions. Instead, they communicated through some kind of biological network that the ship's computers could barely translate. When the connection finally stabilized, Carter's voice carried across space to the approaching enemy fleet. "Attention, Hive forces. This is Admiral Carter of the human fleet. You will cease your attack on Varian territory and withdraw immediately. This is your only warning." The response came not in words but in action. The Hive ships accelerated toward the human fleet, their formations spreading out like the fingers of a giant hand preparing to crush an insect. Johnson watched his sensors as dozens of smaller attack craft launched from the main Hive vessels. "Admiral, they're deploying fighters. Estimate 300 small craft incoming, with the main fleet about 6 hours behind them." Carter walked to his command chair and activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter. The enemy has made their choice. Weapons free. Engage at will. Show these creatures what humans do to things that hurt innocent people." The first wave of Hive fighters approached the human fleet like a swarm of angry insects. They moved in perfect formation, their biomechanical hulls gleaming in the starlight. These craft had terrorized dozens of species across the galaxy. They had never faced human destroyers before. The human ships opened fire with weapons that had been designed during centuries of warfare on Earth. Railguns that fired projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Particle beams that could cut through armor like paper. Missile systems that tracked their targets through dimensions that most aliens didn't even know existed. The first Hive fighter to enter weapons range lasted exactly 12 seconds. The second lasted 8. By the time the 4th minute of combat had ended, the entire Hive attack wave had been reduced to glowing debris. Carter watched the tactical display with satisfaction. "Communications. Send a message to the main Hive fleet. Tell them they have 1 hour to begin withdrawal, or we'll come to them." The Hive response was immediate and predictable. The entire enemy fleet changed course, accelerating directly toward the human position. "Well," Carter said calmly, settling into his command chair, "I guess we do this the hard way." The battle began with a sound that had never been heard in this part of space before. Human weapons didn't whisper or hum like the energy beams most aliens used. They roared. The thunder of railguns firing metal slugs at incredible speeds echoed through the hulls of every ship in the fleet. Captain David Miller stood on the bridge of the destroyer Wolverine, watching as his weapons officer targeted the largest cluster of Hive ships. The Wolverine was smaller than the flagship, but it packed enough firepower to level a small moon. Miller had been fighting pirates and raiders for 10 years, but this was different. This wasn't about capturing criminals or protecting trade routes. This was about complete elimination of a threat. Weapons lock confirmed, his tactical officer reported. Ready for kinetic bombardment. Miller nodded. Kinetic bombardment was a human innovation that most aliens found disturbing. Instead of using energy weapons that could be deflected by shields, humans simply threw metal objects at their enemies very, very fast. The chunks of steel hit with the force of nuclear weapons, and there was no defense against them, except not being there when they arrived. Above the main fleet, Commander Rachel Green led her fighter squadron through a dive that would have killed any alien pilot. Human fighters were built differently than other species craft, where aliens designed their ships to keep pilots comfortable and safe. Humans built theirs to maximize combat effectiveness, even if it meant the crew had to endure crushing forces. Green's voice crackled over the radio as her squadron screamed toward the hive formation. Phoenix Squadron, weapons hot. We're going in fast and hitting hard. Remember, these things have been terrorizing innocent people for months. Time to return the favor. Her fighters moved at speeds that seemed impossible. The gravitational forces should have turned the pilots into liquid. But humans had trained for decades to handle accelerations that would be fatal to most species. Each pilot wore a suit that helped their bodies cope with the crushing pressure, and they had learned to think clearly even when their vision started to tunnel from the G-forces. The hive ships tried to respond, but they had never faced an enemy like this before. Their weapons were designed to overwhelm peaceful civilian targets, not to engage military vessels built for war. When hive fighters tried to intercept the human squadron, they moved like slugs compared to Green's pilots. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Adams watched the battle from the assault carrier Hammer. Adams commanded the Marine contingent, soldiers who specialized in boarding enemy vessels and fighting in close quarters. He had studied the intelligence reports about hive ships and found them interesting from a tactical perspective. "Look at those hull designs," he told his officers, pointing at the tactical display. "Those ships are built to intimidate, not to fight. All those spikes and organic curves might scare farmers, but they're actually weak points. Any Marine with a plasma cutter could breach those hulls in minutes." The hive had been successful for one simple reason. They had never encountered real military resistance. Most of the species they attacked were peaceful civilizations with small defensive fleets. The few that tried to fight back used conventional tactics, energy weapons, and careful maneuvering designed to minimize casualties. Humans didn't fight that way. Admiral Carter coordinated the entire assault from the Retribution's bridge, but his role was more like a conductor directing an orchestra than a traditional fleet commander. Human military doctrine emphasized independent action and aggressive initiative. Each ship captain knew their mission and was free to accomplish it however they saw fit. "Target the largest ships first," Carter ordered over the fleet communication system. "Those look like command vessels. Take out their coordination, and the smaller ships will be easier to handle." The human fleet moved through the hive formation like a pack of wolves attacking a herd of sheep. Each ship captain identified the most dangerous targets in their area and eliminated them with overwhelming firepower. There was no careful positioning or elegant maneuvering. Humans had learned warfare from thousands of years of fighting each other, and those lessons were harsh and direct. The hive ships began to break formation as their command vessels were destroyed one by one. Without central coordination, the individual ships started making their own decisions about how to respond to the human attack. Some tried to flee, others attempted to fight back. A few seemed to freeze in place, as if unsure what to do without orders from their collective consciousness. Captain Miller's Wolverine closed in on a cluster of medium-sized hive vessels that were trying to retreat toward the edge of the system. Miller had no intention of letting them escape to attack other worlds later. "All guns, Continuous fire, he ordered. I want those ships reduced to scrap metal. The Wolverine's weapons batteries opened up with a sustained barrage that lit up space like a miniature star. The hive ships tried to return fire, but their organic weapons were no match for human military technology. One by one, they were torn apart by the concentrated firepower. Commander Green's fighter squadron had penetrated deep into the enemy formation, striking at targets of opportunity. Her pilots moved through the hive fleet like sharks in a feeding frenzy, destroying anything that looked important. Green leader to all fighters, she broadcast. I'm seeing some kind of large bioship in the center of their formation. Looks like it might be their main command vessel. Copy that, Commander, came Admiral Carter's voice over the radio. All ships, priority target identified. Focus fire on the central command vessel. The massive bioship was unlike anything humans had encountered before. It was the size of a small space station, covered in what looked like living tissue that pulsed with its own rhythm. This was clearly the brain of the entire hive operation. The human fleet converged on the command vessel from multiple directions, pouring fire into its organic hull. The creature ship tried to defend itself, launching swarms of smaller attack craft, but it was too late. Human weapons were designed to destroy hardened military targets, not living organisms. Within minutes, the great bioship was dead, its hull cracking open to spill strange fluids into the vacuum of space. The effect on the rest of the hive fleet was immediate and dramatic. Ships that had been fighting in coordinated formations suddenly began moving erratically. Some crashed into each other. Others simply stopped moving entirely, as if their crews had forgotten what they were supposed to be doing. The battle was over in 18 hours. Not a single human ship had been lost. The hive fleet was completely destroyed, reduced to glowing debris scattered across the star system, as the last enemy ship exploded under human fire. Admiral Carter opened a communication channel to the Varian refugee fleet. Council Leader Thaler. This is Admiral Carter. The hive threat in your territory has been eliminated. Your homeworld is safe. The silence after the battle was deafening. For the first time in months, Varian space was quiet. No distress calls echoed across communication channels. No refugee ships fled burning worlds. The hive was gone, completely and utterly destroyed. But the galaxy was still trying to understand what had just happened. Council Leader Thaler sat in his damaged command ship, staring at the debris field that had once been the most feared fleet in known space. Chunks of biometal drifted past his viewport, glowing faintly as they cooled in the vacuum. Just 18 hours ago, his people had been facing extinction. Now they were safe, but the price of that safety was something the galaxy had never seen before. The human fleet hung motionless in space, their dark hulls scarred from battle, but still radiating power. These ships had just accomplished something that every major military force in the galaxy had declared impossible. They had not just defeated the hive, they had erased them from existence. Thaler activated his communication system with trembling hands. The message he was about to send would be heard by every intelligence service, every government, and every military commander from here to the Galactic Core. Admiral Carter, he began, his voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and fear. Your people have saved us. 4 billion Varians owe you their lives. Our children will grow up because of what you did here today. He paused, gathering courage for the question that everyone in the galaxy wanted answered. But we must ask, Admiral, are you conquerors? Do you seek to claim our worlds as payment for your protection? Will you demand tribute from us, or make us part of your empire? The response came immediately, broadcast not just to the Varian fleet, but across all frequencies, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear it. Council Leader Thaler, this is Admiral Carter. The human's voice was calm and matter-of-fact. We came here because you asked for help. The threat has been eliminated. Our mission is complete. We're going home now. The simplicity of that statement sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Species that had been monitoring the situation from safe distances suddenly found themselves re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about interstellar politics. The Kethari Empire had expected the humans to demand territorial concessions. The Trade Federation had prepared economic offers, assuming the humans would want exclusive trading rights. The Silver Alliance had drafted treaties that would acknowledge human dominance over this sector of space. None of that happened. The human fleet simply regrouped and prepared to return to their own territory, asking for nothing in return for saving an entire civilization back on Earth. General Mike Thompson sat in his Pentagon office, reading Admiral Carter's after-action report. The document was clinical and precise, but Thompson could read between the lines. His people had just sent a message to the galaxy, whether they intended to or not. Colonel Lisa Davis entered the office carrying a stack of intelligence briefings from across known space. Her expression was a mixture of pride and concern. "Mike, you need to see these reports. Every major government in the galaxy is reassessing their military strategies." She activated the holographic display, showing communication intercepts from dozens of different species. The translations scrolled past faster than Thompson could read them, but the general theme was clear. "The Altarian Republic is calling. It the human solution," Davis reported. "Complete and total elimination of threats, with no attempts at negotiation or compromise. The Spiral Confederation is redesigning their entire fleet based on what they observed our ships doing." Thompson nodded grimly. He had expected this reaction, but seeing it happen was still unsettling. Humanity had just demonstrated a level of military capability that made every other species nervous. "What about the hive?" he asked. "Any signs of survivors?" Davis shook her head. Carter's people were thorough. Intelligence estimates that the human fleet eliminated over 98% of the entire hive species. The few ships that escaped won't be able to maintain their population. They'll go extinct within a generation. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the room. Humanity had just committed genocide, but it was genocide against a species that had been doing the same thing to others for decades. The moral calculus was complicated, but the practical results were clear. Across the galaxy, other predatory species were reconsidering their expansion plans. The Ravager clans, who had been raiding the outer colonies, suddenly found excuses to stay in their own territory. The Void Hunters, who specialized in attacking isolated settlements, began looking for safer targets farther from human space. Word spread through criminal networks and pirate bases. Earth's children were not to be provoked. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought to eliminate threats completely, and they were very good at it. Admiral Carter's final log entry was transmitted back to Earth, along with the official report. Within weeks, it was being studied at every military academy in human space, and bootleg copies were circulating among alien intelligence services. "We didn't come to Varian space seeking conquest or glory," Carter had written. "We came because innocent people were being murdered, and no one else was willing to stop it. We answered their call for help the only way we knew how, with absolute victory." The log continued. "Let this be a lesson to any species that thinks they can prey on the weak and defenseless. Humans protect those who cannot protect themselves. We don't negotiate with genocidal monsters. We eliminate them." The galaxy was learning to live with a new reality. Humanity had emerged from their isolated corner of space, not as merchants or diplomats, but as guardians. They asked for nothing in return for their protection, but they also made it clear that their protection came at a terrible price for anyone who threatened innocence. Other species began to understand why humans were called Deathworlders. It wasn't just because they came from a dangerous planet. It was because they had learned to bring that danger with them wherever they went. The Varian worlds began to rebuild, their people finally able to plan for a future without fear. Children who had grown up as refugees started returning to their home planets. Art and music began to flourish again as the shadow of the hive finally lifted. But throughout the galaxy, military planners and government officials were asking themselves the same question. What would happen if humanity ever decided that their civilization was a threat that needed to be eliminated? For now, that question remained unanswered. The humans had returned to their own space, apparently content to leave the rest of the galaxy alone. But everyone knew that if another species started committing genocide, the dark ships from Earth would return, and next time, they might not be so merciful to anyone who stood in their way.